man, it doesn't have to be so hard. If you're really trying as hard as you can and it's not really paying off, maybe your product is just not in a position where you can market it easily.
Hello and welcome back to Indie Bites, the podcast where I bring you stories of fellow indie hackers in 15 minutes or less. Today I'm joined by Dominik Sobe, the founder of Helpkit, a product that he started last year that turns Notion pages into a professional help centre, now doing 4.5k MRR. In this episode we talk about Dom's many failed projects, how he finally found something that worked with Helpkit, and how he went from wanting to be a management consultant to being an indie hacker. But before we talk about Dom's story, I'd like to reintroduce you to a returning sponsor, Figura. As indie hackers, we know how to make a great product, but sometimes design is an afterthought. But you, savvy indie hacker, want to do something about it. And here is where Figura comes in. Figura offers the best vetted product designers and contractors to give you a hand. And founder Dennis has given a frankly absurd deal to start you off. Just use the code INDIE199 to get $199 off to start your project for free. Go show Figura some love, head to figura.digital or hit the link in the show notes. Let's get into this episode. Dom, welcome to the pod. How are you doing?
Hey James, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about your background. I didn't really know much about you when I started seeing the tweets about Helpkit. So talk me through some of your previous projects, what you were doing in the past, so people will have a little bit of context.
I've been indie hacking now for the past 2 or 3 years, and it all started during my undergrad management and economics study, where I found out that coding is a really interesting thing, and I basically self-taught myself how to code as a hobby project. And initially, I really wanted to work at like one of the top 3 management consultancies and become a management consultant, wearing a suit, traveling around the world, and just working for big corporations. And while I was thinking about doing that, I was also having troubles preparing for my job interview. Management consulting job interviews are really straightforward, but there is a lot of practice that you have to do. And I was looking for books basically that teach yourself how to do it, and there are a bunch of them, but there was no app. And so I was at a position where I was like, you know what? I'm kind of teaching myself how to code right now as a hobby. Why not just build an app that helps you to prepare for the management consulting interview? And initially I didn't really have like much expectations for any of my apps to make money, but the moment I made my first $5, I think it kind of changed everything, because that moment on, I realized I can actually make money on the internet.
So that first $5 you got on the internet, I don't think that's really enough to turn you from this dream of becoming a management consultant to I'm going to be an indie hacker now, I've made money on the internet. Is there still part of you that if Helpkit doesn't work out, you will still pursue that dream? You're still doing your master's at the moment.
No, not at all. Honestly, I think I'm at this point unemployable. I absolutely love being my own boss, working on my own things. And I kind of just enjoy like the whole process of being an quote unquote indie hacker, doing the coding, but also trying to do marketing, which I'm not really good at, but I'm trying to become better. And it's just this process of learning that I think I just cannot go back to being employed at this point now.
I think that's relatable for many indie hackers, myself included. I couldn't go back to a regular job. So let's talk about some of the projects you've started and failed. Talk about Case Stores to me.
Yeah, so Case Stores is the app that I mentioned earlier. It's basically a mobile app that helps you to prepare for the management consulting job interview. And it's basically just like a bunch of preparation books condensed into an interactive app. It didn't necessarily fail. It's still generating, I think, around like $200 to $400 a month. It's not really as recurring because I have a lot of lifetime purchases, but it's still out there. People still like it. But so that was basically my first app that I built. And the very first version was really scrappy, to be honest. Like I didn't even, like looking back, I think this typical quote that you get to see a lot of on Twitter, like you gotta be embarrassed about your first product. That was definitely the case. Like I was extremely embarrassed about that. So yeah, that was the first product. And then the next thing that I built was a platform called Film Types, which is basically it's a directory for analog film stocks, and it's been very well received by the analog film community. I think I got like 500,000 page views on the first day, which was insane. It's still a really fun side project, but I think I couldn't really find a way to monetize it. Then I stumbled on this issue that whenever I was building like some sort of mobile app, I wanted to preview how your app can look like on the App Store. And there are some Figma templates or sketch templates that you could use, but I wanted something to be a bit easier. So I basically built a web app where you can plug in your screenshots of your App Store, of your App Store presence, and then it just shows you like how it looks like on an iPad, on an iPhone 10, you name it. And that thing is called Store Previewer. And that was kind of like my first try at SaaS. And I completely over-engineered it. I think I spent like 4 months working on the most crazy real-time team collaboration features. And in the end, not a single person used these super complicated features. Like that was the project where I realized, spending a lot of time and effort on something doesn't equal getting a monetary value out of it. And so that was a very hard lesson for me to learn, because I almost went into a little depression after that. And it took me, I think, 2 months to really get out of it again. Like actually, I was at a point where I couldn't look at my computer screen anymore. And then all of a sudden, I got my motivation back. And that's when I was at the point of starting Helpkit.
Let's move on to Helpkit. And what was the impetus for it? Where did you discover this need for Notion help centers?
Whenever I was building some sort of product, I was at the stage where I really wanted to have a knowledge base for the product, because I knew that for me, just handling support tickets can really be a pain in the ass. And at the same time, I realized that I'm basically using Notion for everything in my life. I'm documenting my whole business, but also my personal life there. And then it just kind of clicked where I thought, you know what? Is it somehow possible to just write my help articles in Notion and then somehow expose them externally on a website that looks like a really proper knowledge base that I can kind of customize, but still have all my content in Notion? I didn't really act up on it, I think, after having the idea for like 2 months. And then I remember Simon, a really good indie hacker friend of mine, he was like, you know what? We should do a hackathon. We're just going to pick an idea you have always wanted to work on, and we're just going to try to build it in like 1 day. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to make like the Notion page accessible via a website, see if it can work. And so I did. And I think the first MVP was super crappy, but it worked. And so that really gave me the motivation to just explore it a bit, I should say.
So you, in the past year with Helpkit, you got it to 4.5k MRR. That's amazing. What did you do to get those first customers and then build that revenue over time?
So the initial customers basically came from the idea of trying to validate the product before even building it. And so that's what I actually did. I built a landing page with a pre-order, basically just built a whole idea of Helpkit in Figma. I made a nice screenshot and launched it on Twitter. The first week, nothing really happened, and I kind of got bummed out. But then I got my first like yearly sale, like pre-order sale. Then all of a sudden I got the second one, and I was like, okay, this is going somewhere. And then it kind of stagnated again for like 5 more days. Nothing really happened. And then I got this one email, which was it probably took me like 8-10 minutes to read. It was this long, and it was just this genuine help of trying to tell me how cool Helpkit is and that I'm on the right path. It's a really cool product. I should just continue building it. And it was just this guy I'd never heard of. He just randomly emailed me and gave me so much advice and tips. And that was, I think, the tipping point. Was like, you know what? I'm just going to pursue it. I'm going to build it. I only got 2 pre-orders, but I think I might be onto something. And so the initial customers actually came from Twitter, just building in public and then trying to slowly get into the Notion community as well on Twitter, which is really big. And I think the second flow came from the concept of engineering to marketing, or engineering for marketing, which is basically building some sort of side projects that are related to your main product that drive traffic to your main product. What I did in that specific case is that I found out that for Notion at that point, when I was starting with Helpkit, you couldn't build simple tables in Notion. And so I built this little website called Notion Simple Table, and it's literally just a generator that generates the LaTeX code with a nice UI of a normal looking table that you can paste into Notion, and that gives you this super nice looking, kind of natively integrated simple table. And I posted it in Product Hunt, got top 5, and the Notion community just absolutely loved it. It was free, obviously. And I think that was like the second kind of wave that pushed people towards Helpkit. And that also got Notion consultants kind of interested in following me on Twitter. And that's how I think the second wave started, of people kind of knowing that I'm building something on Notion.
Just want to quickly deviate to building on top of Notion. Why did you choose this? Was it a little bit easier to do? Was it because there was an established Notion community that liked using Notion for building websites or as their wiki anyway?
There's a funny quick story for this. When I was building StorePreview, it really felt hard for me to get customers. I had to do cold emailing, cold calling. With that being said, I had this amazing boat trip last year in Lisbon, and I remember there was this one guy, a Russian guy, we were talking about like StorePreview and his projects, and then I was talking about how hard it is for me to get customers and then how it feels like a drag to just get the initial customers. And then he told me about this concept of basically building something in a growing niche versus building something in a declining or stagnating niche. And that kind of changed my whole view. So what I mean with this is that if you pick a niche that is growing, i.e. in that case, Notion, it's sort of like if you're sailing and you have the wind that is in your favor pushing you towards your destination. Or the other way that I was kind of doing with StorePreview, and a lot of indie hackers are doing, is you kind of trying to go against the current. And I knew that if I can build something that is on a growing trend versus a declining trend, I already have basically one bullet point checked already. And that moment when I hear the story, basically what he said is, man, it doesn't have to be so hard. If you're really trying as hard as you can and it's not really paying off, maybe your product is just not in a position where you can market it easily. And that's going to be hard down the line. When he said this, I was like, okay, my next project's got to be focused on something that is growing. And it just happened that I had this knowledge-based idea, and Notion was just getting more and more popular and more companies were using it.
So you've spoken about building in public being a good channel for you, building in a growing market. How about other marketing channels you've used? Has it been solely this, or have there been other things you've done to grow Helpkit?
I would say that I kind of started doubling down a bit on SEO. I was building very targeted landing pages, not blog articles so far, which I still have to do. But I think the initial few landing pages that I built were very well positioned in terms of keywords that people were looking for. And so while I think in the first, maybe let's say 6 months, I saw that the majority of customers actually came from Twitter, now it's like almost 60-70% from SEO. Without me necessarily doing that much, it was just like maybe 4 or 5 landing pages that I built for the feature set that Helpkit was offering.
Now, Dom, when you got to 3k MRR, you decided you can go full time, spend most of your time on this. How did that feel?
Amazing. Like I said, when I started my master's, my goal was to reach about 1.5-ish, 1.5k MR US dollars to become ramen profitable. And having reached 3k, I think 6 months before I kind of graduate, I was really grateful for this. It kind of motivated me even more to just keep on building stuff and just finally now kind of being able to also know that I can work on this after I graduate. I don't have to look for a job. I don't have to do freelance. I can really work on this full time and make sure that I can grow it as best as I can and put in all my resources that I have, which is kind of like a dream, to be honest.
All right, well, Dom, I end every episode on 3 recommendations: a book, a podcast, and an indie hacker.
A book, I would say Start Small, Stay Small by Rob Walling. Podcast, I still like, I absolutely love the Indie Hackers podcast. And if I would have to choose one indie hacker, it would probably be Minh Phu Tran, a friend of mine who is basically used to build a lot of projects on Notion, but now he's kind of venturing into Notion unrelated projects. He's now working on a to-do list app and also kind of like a website build in the future. And I think he's one of the most skilled programmers that I know.
Absolutely, Dom. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Indie Bites.
Thanks, James.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Indie Bites. All links to everything discussed will be in the show notes as always. A big thank you to today's sponsor, Figura, the best place to find designers for your product. And finally, if you have a podcast but editing takes up all of your time, then drop me a message. I can help you out. I run an editing service called PodPanda to help you get your time back and fire up your production value. But that's all from me. See you next week.